In the depths of a medieval winter, survival wasn't just a task, it was a fierce daily struggle against a world cloaked in ice and shadow. While we might complain about a frosty windshield or a drafty room, medieval peasants faced a cold so savage it could freeze their boots to the earth and turn their breath into shimmering clouds of frost. In regions like England and northern France, winter could drag temperatures down to a merciless 0 degrees Fahrenheit, a chill that invaded their bones and homes alike. Yet with a blend of raw determination and brilliant ingenuity, these people carved out ways to endure their lives, a testament to human resilience in the face of nature's cruelty. Their mornings began in darkness, long before the sun dared to peek over the horizon. They rose from beds that were little more than heaps of hay and straw piled high on floors that froze solid as winter tightened its grip. These weren't mere piles of dried grass, they were shields against the cold. Historical records show peasants stack their bedding up to 2 feet deep, a thick barrier between their weary bodies and the icy ground beneath. In summer, they'd hoard extra hay, treating it like gold, knowing it would be their salvation when the snow fell. Each dawn, they'd shake out their beds, often finding tiny stowaways, mice burrowing for warmth, beetles munching on straw, or even a stray egg from a chicken that had wandered too close. The hay pressed tight held pockets of air that acted as nature's own insulation, keeping the bitter chill at bay. But it wasn't perfect. In the damp air of medieval Europe, the straw soaked up moisture, growing musty and sprouting mold, a small trade-off for staying alive through the night. A chronicler from those times wrote of peasants waking with frost, dusting their eyebrows, a stark sign of the frigid air inside their homes. These hay beds, rough and humble, were more effective than they seemed. Unlike our modern mattresses, which bedbugs love, hay was less inviting to pests, though not entirely free of them. By day, the piles doubled as seats, like rustic cushions for the occasional guest. It was simple, rugged, and brilliantly practical. But hay was just the start. Wool was their true savior, a fabric so vital it became part of who they were. Experts guess a peasant family might own 20 pounds of wool clothing, a heavy load that turned them into walking bundles of fleece. Each spring they'd barter with shepherds for raw wool, then spend endless hours washing, combing, and spinning it into something wearable. This wasn't the smooth, soft wool we know. It was rough, dense, and greasy with lanolin, the sheep's natural oil that repelled water. It stank like a soggy barn in the rain, but it kept the wet out, a lifesaver when waterproof gear didn't exist. Washing wool was a gamble they rarely took. Wet wool in winter could spell doom. There's a tale of a peasant named John who washed his coat during a cold snap. It froze so stiff it stood upright on its own, earning laughs from the village, as rigid as John's winter wash, they'd say. The lesson stuck: wool was for warmth, not cleanliness. What set wool apart was its magic trick. It kept you warm even when drenched. Today's tests show wool holds about 80% of its heat when wet, a truth peasants knew in their bones. They'd layer it on 4 to 7 pieces on the worst days: a linen shirt, a wool tunic, another tunic, maybe a jerkin, all topped with a fur-lined cloak tied tight with a rope. They looked like overstuffed figures trudging through the snow, but those layers trapped heat better than any single coat. Dressing was a battle. One story tells of a man so tangled in his clothes his wife had to roll him free. Kids fared worse, swaddled until they could barely walk, tumbling down slopes in helpless heaps. It was funny, but it was also survival. Inside their homes, the fight against winter raged on around the fire pit, a smoky, stubborn heart that gave both comfort and grief. Chimneys were a luxury they didn't have, so smoke escaped through a hole in the roof if it escaped at all. Often it hung thick in the air, burning their eyes and lungs. Digs show these pits were 3 feet wide, ringed with stones, but only about 15% of the heat stayed inside. The rest floated away with the smoke, while snow sometimes slipped through the roof, a cold slap from the world outside. Fuel was whatever they could grab. Lords had neat firewood stacks. Peasants burned broken chairs, old tools, even bits of crumbling barns. In one village, a group tore down an abandoned shed, feeding it to the flames to outlast a brutal winter. The Lord raged, but hunger and cold don't bow to ownership. Keeping the fire going was a fragile dance. At night, they'd bury a coal in ashes, hoping it would smolder until morning. If it died, they'd trudge through the snow to beg a spark from a neighbor, a miserable trip. One clever soul carried a coal home in a hollow turnip, sprinting to keep it alive, as villagers watched, half amused, half impressed. Every glowing ember was a triumph. The smoke had hidden gifts. It chased off bugs and coated the wooden beams, preserving them against rot. Scientists today see the soot as a natural shield, a trick peasants stumbled into. Families tended the fire with care, some staying up in shifts, others murmuring to the flames like they were alive. Maybe it was habit, maybe madness, but that fire was everything. Food was a grim routine. Winter meant roots, turnips, parsnips, and neeps, a tough, earthy trio that filled a pot over the fire. They'd simmer all day into an endless stew spiced with whatever they could scrounge, bark for bulk pebbles for grit, even leather scraps for a desperate bite. One family threw in their wooden spoons, swearing it added taste. True or not, it showed their grit. Preserving food was an art. Summer harvests were buried in sand or stashed in dark corners. Meat was salted or smoked. Some got so good at it they traded tricks. A smoking tip for a handful of turnips was a steal. Wild herbs like poor man's pepper hid the flavor of spoiled stew, while dried plants dangling from the ceiling doubled as medicine. With no doctors, those herbs fought off sickness, though the smoky air likely clogged their chests. Then there were the animals' unlikely allies in the cold. Up to 30% of their homes housed livestock in winter. Cows, pigs, sheep, chickens, all crammed inside. A cow's heat rivaled a fire. Pigs radiated warmth. Chickens snuggled close, and sheep were woolly heaters. It was chaos with a purpose. Picture eating supper as a pig roots in your dish, or waking to a rooster's screech in the dark. A merchant once griped that a rooster tormented him all night, crowing in his face. Homes had low walls to pen the beasts, but they rarely stayed put, turning the space into a loud, smelly refuge. The animals did more than warm them. Their breath softened the dry air, making it feel cozier. Science says humidity can lift a room's warmth by degrees. They also guarded the house. No thief could slip past a honking goose or a grumpy pig. It was a living alarm system. Their homes were clever, too. Many were dug into the ground 3 or 4 feet down using the earth's steady heat. Walls were a jumble of mud, straw, stones, even old Roman bricks, a patchwork of necessity. One hut might blend medieval grit with ancient rubble, a survivor's collage. Drafts were plugged with a mix of mud, straw, and dung, cutting heat loss by 60%. Doors faced away from the wind, often with a short tunnel to block the cold like an igloo's mouth. Roofs thick with branches and turf sometimes sprouted grass, adding insulation and a nibble for bold goats. Stepping outside demanded tools born of need. Snow shovels carved from hardwood scooped 30% more snow than today's versions, though their weight made every lift a chore. Thick socks woven with rabbit fur were treasures worth a chicken at market. They shielded toes from frostbite. Mittens stuffed with moss or feathers kept hands alive. One villager even used cat hair, a furry lifeline. Snow scorers' sticks set along paths before storms guided them through whiteouts. One village dyed them with berries, mapping routes in color. Weather came from the animals. Huddled cows meant a storm. Straw-hoarding pigs signaled a freeze. It was rough, but it worked. Their story is one of stubborn brilliance. Hay became bed's wool, became walls' fire. A friend, animals' kin. Homes stood firm. Tools carved a path. Food stretched thin, but lasted. Without machines or ease, they leaned on wit and memory, beating winter one icy day at a time. It's a tale of human fire against nature's frost.